Flight, conquering the air. The history of aviation began long before the famous Wright brothers successfully flew the first engine-driven flying machine. People had dreamed of flying for thousands of years before. Stories of godlike individuals who could fly were common in many cultures. As early as 400 BCE, ancient civilizations experimented with flying apparatuses. A Greek scholar named Archytas, for example, built a wooden pigeon that flew through the air. Around the same time, the Chinese discovered how to fly kites, the precursors of 18th century gliders. The first manned flights were made in large linen balloons attached to baskets. The first of these was built in 1783 by two French papermakers, brothers Jacques and Joseph Montgolfier. Early balloons were filled with hot air, produced from burning wool and straw to make them rise. They were free-floating, however, which made them difficult to control. The turn of the 19th century also saw the invention of gliders, which were heavier than air. Between 1891 and 1896, Otto Lilienthal of Germany made the first successful manned glider flight. Gliders, however, were not designed to carry passengers or cargo, making them an impractical means of transportation. The Wright brothers built their first airplane in 1903. The Flyer was a two-winged, wooden-framed plane covered with cotton cloth and propelled by a gasoline engine. Flights lasted as long as half an hour. During the early 1900s, other pioneer pilots designed, built, and improved planes for personal pleasure flying. Pilots attempted national and international flights, successfully traveling across the United States and between European countries. Early flyers participated in many air races and circuses. These tests of flying skill not only improved airplane design and flying techniques, but also made flying more popular. Meanwhile, the United States Army contracted the Wright brothers to build the world's first military plane. World War I greatly contributed to the development of modern airplanes. Warring countries recognized the value in using planes to locate enemy forces and army bases. Military engineers worked diligently to design better internal structures and more powerful engines. These were needed to support swifter fighter planes and heavier bombers. The decades following World War I marked the golden age of flying. During this period, the world's first scheduled airline carried passengers and freight across Tampa Bay, between St. Petersburg and Tampa, Florida. The U.S. Postal Service began using modified military planes to fly mail between a few major cities. Engineers, meanwhile, continued to improve airplane design, with the goal of creating safer and more powerful transport planes. German engineers developed the first all-metal three-motor plane. The design was eventually bought by Henry Ford, a United States automobile maker who manufactured tri-motor planes that could carry 10 passengers and fly up to 160 kilometers per hour. Engineering improvements in the 1930s made it possible for planes to be bigger, fly faster and further, and carry heavier loads. In addition to technological devices that improved airplane safety and control, which enabled planes to fly more smoothly and pilots to navigate more accurately, engineers developed pressurized cabins, which made breathing easier when traveling thousands of meters above the earth. Commercial and military airplane advancements continued throughout World War II, eventually making heavy-load transnational flights possible. During the late 1940s, airlines worked to improve the crude jet engines introduced in World War II as a more powerful alternative to the traditional gasoline engines. In 1952, engineers in Great Britain built the world's first commercial jet airliner, the de Havilland Comet. 6 years later, the United States introduced the Boeing 707, a four-engine jetliner that was the predecessor for today's most popular commercial airliner, the Boeing 747, which can carry more than 400 passengers. Today, supersonic airplanes are among the newest developments in air transportation. These planes can fly faster than sound, the speed of which declines with increased altitude. The first supersonic jets were military bombers. By the 1970s, however, England and France offered cargo and transport services using a supersonic transport jet plane called the Concorde, whose international flights were limited out of concern for passenger safety and environmental impact and are now no longer in service.